It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS AM 1160 and 101.1 FM. Our conversation with Howard Blum, the author of Night of the Assassins, the untold story of Hitler's plot to kill FDR, Churchill, and Stalin, is brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Howard, good morning.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to have you on the air, but I have to confess I'm mad at you.
Uh-oh.
I'm mad at you because we had you on the air with your book, A Dark Invasion, a few years ago. You've written a couple since then, and I didn't get a shot at you because these books that you write, you do it so well. The narrative action is just fantastic, and you've done it again with this one.
Thank you very much. I try to tell a true story and to also keep my readers entertained and inform them about things they might not have known about.
I'll tell you something that really... It didn't surprise me because I've read you before and talked with you before, but it just continually amazes me if it doesn't surprise me. And that is the fact that even in this case, when we know the outcome, we know that FDR, Churchill, and Stalin were not assassinated at their summit in Tehran, you still keep the suspense going. And in fact, for one of the rare times ever, you kept it going not only past the narrative action, but into the epilogue. And you even had me on the edge of my seat with your note on the sources. How did you do all of that?
Well, thank you. The real events are so suspenseful in the fact that the Germans get horrifically close to succeeding as they send their assassins into the city. The conference spreads over 4 days. 6 trained commandos, SS men, went to a special action school, are armed, have bombs, and they're on the loose in the city of 1 million people. And one man, Mike Riley, FDR's Secret Service agent, the head of the detail, as he describes himself self-deprecatingly, an Irish cop with more brawn than brains, he was a former college football star, has to work with the Russians to track them down. And all the action sort of heads to the moment of Churchill's 69th birthday party, which is in the British Embassy. And there's a photo in the book, the front piece, and you can see FDR, Churchill, and Stalin sitting shoulder to shoulder, the birthday cake carved up in front of them. They're singing happy birthday. And at that moment, 6 well-trained commandos are on the loose trying to make it in through water tunnels that connect to the British Embassy to surprise the 3 Allied leaders that evening and to change history.
So it is 1943. Germany, many of the folks within the German hierarchy realize they're not going to win this war. Hitler's about the last person to acknowledge that. But introduce us to these 2 main characters who are playing this chess match across thousands of miles and don't even know each other. You mentioned Mike Riley.
Yes, there's Mike Riley, and on the other side, the man who's leading the commandos is a man called Otto Skorsenzi. He is an SS man, a true believer. He has a dueling scar. He's head of the SS Commando School, and he had a famous success that made the Nazis believe that an impossible mission could in fact be possible. What happened was Mussolini was taken captive by the Italians, put on a top of a 7,000-foot mountain in the Italian Alps. He was protected by dozens of troops, and there was no way to get him. The only way to get up to the top of that mountain seemed to be a cable car, but a battalion of Italian troops guarded it. Hitler gives Skorsenzi the mission, I want Mussolini, rescue him for me. So Skorsenzi thinks about having paratroopers drop out of the sky, but the winds are too strong. They'll be blown off the mountaintop. You can't have planes land because there's a rocky field. So he makes a daring attempt with 12 gliders on September 12th, 1943. 5 of the gliders survive, and Skorsenzi rushes into the hotel, gets Mussolini from his captors, and brings him back to Hitler's hideout. And once this impossible mission succeeded, Skorsenzi was called by the Allies the most dangerous man in Europe, and Hitler appoints him to lead this Operation Long Jump to target the 3 Allied leaders at Tehran.
And moving the chess pieces around from the German side is Walter Schellenberg. He's a general in the SS. He's got his own issues, his own rivalries that he has to overcome in order to get done what he believes needs to be done in order to change the outcome of the war, or at least in order to change the surrender terms. Tell me about Walter Schellenberg.
Schellenberg is head of Section 6 of the SS. It's their Cloak and Daggers operation. And he's a young man, 33 years old, same age as Mike Riley. And he's really not a dyed-in-the-wool Nazi. He's not a true believer. He's more a bureaucrat. And he realizes that the war is lost. And worse than that, now that FDR has demanded an unconditional surrender, he and the other Nazi leaders will have to appear before war crime tribunals and answer for their crimes against humanity, for their killing of civilians, extermination of Jews and gypsies and homosexuals. They will have to go before a court, and they will be sentenced to death unless he can come up with something. So he meets with the head of the military intelligence, and they try to figure out a plan. The Allies have been talking about meeting somewhere in the world, but this is going to be a top secret meeting. The Germans need to find out where this meeting is taking place, and then they need to come up with a plan against the largest military organization in the face of the world. America, Britain, and the Russians. And how can they make an attack that succeeds? And yet, piece by piece, and with a great deal of luck, Schellenberg is able to formulate a strategy.
We're talking with Howard Blum. The book is Night of the Assassins, the untold story of Hitler's plot to kill FDR, Churchill, and Stalin. Your book is absolutely loaded with all kinds of intriguing characters, double agents, a beautiful female spy. It's really fascinating. There's a wrestler, an Iranian wrestler, who plays a key role. One other of the really key characters I want to talk about is Rudolf von Holtenflug, because you mentioned the six-man squad. It was supposed to be a much larger group that was going to make this assassination happen. It really came down to Holtenflug and his six guys. Introduce us to him.
Holtenflug is an aristocratic warrior. He is a German military man. His family has been for generations in the German military, and he is an instructor at the Brandenburg School of Special Operations. That's the AFORBS, Military Intelligence's school, where they train what they hope will be supermen, men who can go behind the lines, who can live in enemy territory, and can accomplish impossible missions. And he believes, Holtenflug, that 6 men can accomplish more than a battalion, that a single bullet can change history. So the main force that parachutes into Iran is betrayed by a Russian double agent who's working for the Germans. And as soon as these paratroopers come out of the sky, they're either shot or captured by the Russians. But Holtenflug and his men land in the wrong place, and that saves their lives. And they make it into Tehran, a city of 1 million people. And they're on the loose for 6 days, trying to stay one step ahead of Mike Riley and his team as they can build to the moment where they can go through the water tunnels and crash into Churchill's birthday party and kill all 3 of the Allied leaders.
One of the best aspects of your book is this guy, Mike Riley. It really takes us inside the mind of a Secret Service agent at a time when obviously there were not the resources that the Secret Service has today, had to rely on his wits. He did have that self-deprecating humor about himself, but this was a guy that was completely devoted to FDR, and it just didn't feel right to him to ever leave FDR's side, did it?
No, and the challenges that Mike was facing they seemed insurmountable. He gets the job, head of the detail, just 2 days after Pearl Harbor, and he's suddenly in charge of the safety of a wartime president. But this was a war like no other for America. It was the first time that enemy bombers could fly across the Atlantic and bomb the White House, that enemy paratroopers could drop out of the sky. And even more than that, this president was quite literally a sitting target. He was paralyzed, FDR. Mm-hmm. So Mike Riley realized that when it came to it, he would have to put his body in front of the president, and he was prepared to do that to save him. And then when they get to Tehran for the conference, Mike Riley sees a city where there's typhoid raging, and with FDR's immune system, he worries about that. Just like today, there's an invisible enemy that's stalking the streets of Iran. We were going against the pandemic of COVID. They were going against typhoid. And Mike Riley has to protect FDR about that, too. And it's a tense moment for the Secret Service. They go into Tehran, and they don't realize at first what they've gotten into. It
really is amazing that Riley is able to function as he does. He's just a tremendous man. With all of those anxieties that he has to deal with and all of the uncertainties, he still does the job in an amazing way. There's so much more we could talk about, Howard, including the fact that we almost torpedoed FDR out of the water on his way to the conference. That certainly would have been changing history. But I want to talk, I mentioned a couple of moments ago, as we are concluding our time together this morning, I want to talk about sources, and I mentioned that, by golly, even the source work for this, these are closely guarded secrets even today, and there are some people that just won't give up what they know.
Yes. When FDR comes back from Tehran, he holds a press conference in the Oval Office, and he talks to the assembled reporters, and he says, we had a bit of a security problem there. There were some Nazi assassins on the loose, and I had to move from the American embassy to the Russian embassy for security reasons. And he says, quote, it would have been a pretty good haul if they had gotten all three of us. And FDR gives one of his hearty laughs, and the reporters join in laughing with him too. But then what's most amazing, and you can hear a tape of this press conference, the conversation just changes. And they let this mystery just hang there in the air. And it remained there largely undiscussed for 60 years. Then the Russians released some of the classified documents on what happened in Tehran, and they produced at a press conference one of their agents who had been there as a young man. I took these Russian classified documents, I went back over memoirs, interviews that were given after the war, and then I went to British, American, and German archives, and I was able to put the pieces together in a puzzle and see how it all fit to tell this story of what really happened. As I say that, I had a conversation at the CIA with a high official, and I told him I was setting out to tell a true story, and he starts laughing. He said, the true story in espionage tales, you'll never get the true story. There's always something hidden. And until that last file is revealed, perhaps like the Kennedy assassination, I think this is a pretty good discussion of what happened on the night of the assassins in Tehran in 1943.
It's amazing. What did Stalin do? What? You leave so many great questions with us. It's a real nail-biter of a book. Howard Blum has been with us. The book is Night of the Assassins, The Untold Story of Hitler's Plot to Kill FDR, Churchill, and Stalin. How do people learn more, Howard?
Well, you can buy the book at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstores. It just came out this week, and it seems to be selling. So I hope people will spend this summer, whether they're socially distancing and sequestered, getting some entertainment by reading this book, and something too, I hope.
Terrific, terrific. And I'm still mad at you. Howard Blum, thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Always good to speak with you. Good to speak with you. Good to speak